We are joined in studio now by Tom Gross, British political commentator and Middle East expert. Tom, very good to have you with us. Let's talk about Cameron's interests in the region, because as far as British interests here are, there don't seem to be any significant ones.
Yes, good to be with you. I think that's right. I think what's happening is a few things to do with domestic British politics. Look, Britain has an election later this year. We see huge street demonstrations numbering hundreds of thousands for the Palestinian cause, or at least anti-Israel, week after week in London. The Conservatives are worried about losing the election. So some of it is just to placate domestic critics or hopefully win Muslim votes for the Conservative Party, ply them away from Labour. But I'd also say Britain this is Cameron's second visit, and he wasn't even the foreign secretary, the foreign minister, at the beginning of this war 3.5 months ago. What happened was that James Cleverly, who was the foreign secretary, was relatively sympathetic to Israel, as was the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, as was the Home Secretary, Interior Minister Suella Braverman. All of them were kind of pushed out in what I'd call a kind of very British coup engineered by the former Conservative leader Lord Haig, and he brought in David Cameron, who had retired. To remind people, he had been the British Prime Minister who failed on the Brexit vote, and he retired from politics. So he wasn't even a member of the House of Commons. He was appointed to the House of Lords, and he's brought in precisely to be harder on Israel by the British Foreign Office. So he spouts things about two-state solutions and so on, which is all well and good, but he never follows through on what does it mean. I'll give you another example where Cameron has failed in the past on the Middle East, and that's Libya, which has international consequences. In 2011, Britain helped overthrow the government of Gaddafi, which is fine, no one liked Gaddafi, but there was no follow-up plan. So what happened is we have destabilization, which has led to illegal mass migration into Britain now, which is a big issue into all of Europe, because people smuggling gangs control Libya, arms from Libya went to Mali, to the Islamists there, to Hamas, to ISIS, and so on. So David Cameron and the British Foreign Office have a track record of saying things that sound nice, like two-state solution. But what does it mean? Does he realize that Gaza was, in effect, a state run by Hamas? It might not be the biggest state, but nor is, I don't know, Luxembourg. Luxembourg's has a perfectly functioning good state, and so could have Gaza. So are they asking questions? What would it mean to have a two-state solution? Do they want another Luxembourg in Gaza, or will they get something more like ISIS? And the British and other Western countries need to think this through properly, and I don't believe that David Cameron is thinking this through at all.
That's actually a great place to look at the flip side of that very same question. Certainly, you mentioned domestic interest for Britain to see some sort of ceasefire, and now they're talking about a sustained immediate pause rather than a ceasefire. But what sort of clout do they have on Israel? Why should Israel listen to these voices from abroad that seem to be entirely against the security needs of the state?
Well, the one thing Britain's doing up to a point, which does serve also Israeli interests, is it's helping to bomb Houthi targets. The Houthis, of course, are another kind of subsidiary of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, just like Hezbollah and Hamas. Hamas are essentially subsidiaries of the Iranian regime. So Britain is helping America vis-a-vis the Houthis up to a point, whereas, for example, France is not helping push back against Houthis. But you're totally right. Apart from that, they just endlessly spout stuff. Again, at the beginning, after October 7th, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak gave a very supportive speech in a synagogue in North London, in which he concluded the speech, Am Israel Chai, the people of Israel live or shall live. So if they want to let the people of Israel live, they cannot leave Hamas in control of Gaza, and they have to make up their mind. What do they mean by a ceasefire or two-state solution? Is it going to leave Hamas in power or not? And one thing I'd say again for domestic British politics is if Hamas are perceived to still be in control at the end, if they raise the Hamas flag over Gaza, this will be a message in London, in Paris, in the Netherlands, in Denmark, in Sweden, in Germany, that Islamists have beaten the mighty IDF, the mighty Israeli army. So what is to stop Islamists in Britain eventually making Sharia law in Britain. And it might seem far-fetched to think that people, British Muslim citizens, want Sharia law. Unfortunately, it isn't. Of course, not all of them, but a significant number absolutely would like to make Sharia law in Europe. And if they see that Hamas, little Hamas, can beat back against mighty Israel, that gives them ideas. So it's not good for Britain for Hamas to win this war either.
You're presenting a major threat at a time that the West cannot afford weakness. Thank you very much, Tom, for analyzing the situation and showing the threat isn't just to Israel.